All right, hello everybody for another episode of the Magento Association Podcast. I have the privilege of speaking with Maier Bianchi today of Bemeir. Did I say that right?
It could be Bemeir, Premier, or Bemeir.
Bemeir.
Yeah, Bemeir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bemeir. Okay. So, Maier, we through our diligent research found out that you got into e-commerce through your parents' Halloween store in Brooklyn. Is that true?
No, not entirely. Like the Halloween stores in Manhattan.
Manhattan. Okay.
I guess I was first.
That's a very New York answer, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Brooklyn is Brooklyn.
Come on.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
In New York City. Yeah. But yeah, no, that's true. That was my first exposure to e-commerce.
And when was that?
Whenever they first launched it, like 2002.
2002.
They launched early on the web. So that was like my first exposure to it. And then I was working on it more later on, like 2008, 7, 8, 9, 10, like 6, 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there.
Right. And then you eventually ended up starting your own agency. When did that happen?
That was 2014. So
okay.
Basically, I had started like learning to code somewhere in 2008, 9, was teaching myself front end. And then actually went to go work at a business called Home Perfect in 2010. And they were doing kitchen, bath, lighting, and like pure play online retail. So that was like, that was my next experience in e-com. I had just spent like a year running the e-com at the Halloween store. So that was very hands-on. And I got a lot of like different facets of experience in my career. And then at the Home Perfect, same thing, was really hands-on, small company. And then I decided to move to Magento at the end of the first year. And that's how I got hands-on with Magento. And at the end of, the end of my time working there around 2014, I was ready to move on. I'd been like 4 years. And that was when I decided to start my company.
So you're about 12 years in now.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess it's getting there. Yeah, I guess this would be 12 years old this October.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. So you say, on your website, and you're a platform agnostic. So you work on different platforms, e-commerce solutions, I'm imagining, for different types of businesses. What makes the Magento community different? How would you describe to yourself or somebody else, or just your vibe of working in this community different than, let's say, working with other platforms?
Well, it's hard to say because I've worked in the Magento community for a while. So I would say it's hard to be like, well, when I was in this community, it was like this, and when it was that, it was like that. So I don't have, I'm in I guess I've been exposed to different things. So I could say Magento is unique as an ecosystem because there's a lot of inventors, a lot of builders. There's that in every ecosystem, but I would say people have to really understand how it works and understand the nuances of the software. It's kind of, I guess it's any software community is like where if there's a lot of terms and there's a lot of things that only mean something in that realm. So essentially you're in like a secret club of those who know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be a very large community. It could be a very small community, depending where you are. So I would say it's inclusive. There's always been a spirit of sharing because it's open source software. So there's always like a spirit of people sharing their solutions, or there was like a big Stack Overflow community in the past. And like people like really wanted to always share knowledge, or there was always like, I always had the sense of like, because what we're doing is not always unique, that there's someone who's come before who's had the same problem. And so I'd said that's what's cool about this community is there's a lot of documentation, or has been historically.
Mm-hmm. And you said secret community, which is kind of interesting. Like, I see that as almost a problem. Like there's like a kind of lack of exposure, or particularly currently. I think the Magento Association is obviously working on that as one of their primary goals, is the idea of getting the messaging out. Not just the Magento brand, but solutions, case studies, things that have problems that the community is solving for businesses. So how do you put the community in perspective, and where do you see it currently? And am I right in saying that it's a little too hidden and it needs to have more exposure?
I mean, what I meant by secret community was like with any piece of software or anything you're doing that's technology related, there's a lot of like esoteric terms that only mean something if people use that software. So that's more what I meant by secret community, meaning like there's a lot of people using it who maybe if you mentioned an attribute set to a person on the street, they'd be like, what are you talking about?
Right. Yeah.
So I just mean like stuff like that, just like in Shopify, people walking around, if you talk about meta fields, it means something to those people, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
So I would say that with the Magento community and the state of the community, it's disparate by country. It's spread apart around the world. It's people united around different causes, meaning like some people are dedicated to certain, there's to know about the community, you have to know the different pillars of the community, right? So there's like extension vendors, there's service providers, there's the merchants themselves, there's individual contributors and developers. And so I would say, and there's also hosting providers. And so I would say each person that works in this ecosystem is focused on something different inherently, whether it's their specific set of problems or they work on a subset of industry problems, meaning like they only focus on one challenge or a set of challenges. And so I would say there's not one thing that necessarily unites everybody. Maybe there's just a blanket umbrella of being the Magento community, but it doesn't necessarily, you're right, have connected relevance to the larger world of e-com, except when something bad happens, right?
Yeah,
when there's a known exploit or vulnerability or something like that. I would say Magento gets more wider attention. But it's not like, there's certain relevance to it where I think if it was, again, I gave a talk about this some years ago, like if the household names that use Magento might be a way to create that affinity, even though that's every kind of software, right, is used by a lot of household names. But I still think it's one way to connect the dots or to make it prevalent in other people's minds. But then also I think we got to ask, who do you want the Magento community to be more known to and why?
Yeah, it's almost like the solutions that the problems Magento can solve are probably some of the more complex ones. And there's the kind of retail perspective of e-commerce, and then there's all the rest of e-commerce, which is not sometimes even referred to as e-commerce, like buying portals or, buying automation or order requests or product configurations, which are not necessarily a straightforward retail type of e-commerce experience. Those are more complex and nuanced, and sometimes the messaging around that is tricky because it's so niche.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point.
I know you've been part of the Magento Association for a while. I have been part of it for a while as well, and I've been working in Magento for a long time. I see there's a difference, like in perception between, let's just say, Europe and North America. The question is Magento more relevant in Europe?
I would just say there's a lot of vocal community and a lot of software creators out of Europe, and the software was created by an American company in Europe, right? Like meaning like there's that element to it. So I think it's always been big in Europe, but I would say no, because why do all the companies want to do business in America, right? Like I think it's very globally connected. Like the brands and the biggest companies that use it, again, are multinational or global corporations, but there's a lot of businesses in America and they want that market share. So I would say it doesn't seem to me like it's more relevant in one place than another. It just has different penetration in different countries, like the Netherlands where Hoeva is at. They like a lot of smaller businesses can use it, or they found more mom and pops are using Magento 2, I guess, in some cases is what this is all anecdotal, have no evidence to support that other than some conversations. But maybe there's just some places where it's used more conveniently, but I would say that's the same here. And if you think about it population wise, again, one small shop in Europe could be equivalent to one small shop in America, right? Like meaning like there could be a business that supports a lot of business in one local area that no one's ever heard of, but still has a big impact on that locality. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it's just perspective based.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Like, I don't know if it's actually more relevant in Europe than it is here.
Yeah. I think it also depends on where in Europe you're talking. Like you say, in the Netherlands, I think there's a lot of relevance because of what, Hoover's contribution to the community. And yeah.
Yeah. And also what markets has Shopify focused on in the last 5 years, and where is it all going? And like, where has there been market share changing hands and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Too.
There was a quote that I picked up in my research. You're saying that some of the former leaders of the Magento community have turned to criticism of the Magento platform openly or moved on. Do you think any of those, is that a true quote, first off? And do you think that some of those criticisms—
You could cite a quote. If you could cite an exact quote, I would speak to my exact quote, but it sounds more just like an assessment, right? Because
yeah. Okay, well, let's go with an assessment. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just say you have that case where there's been people that have worked on a platform before. I wouldn't say they're community leaders, but they've worked on it and now are vocally not working on it, or whatever, right? And so I would say, is the question like, why did they do that, or what exactly?
Do you think any of those criticisms are fair, I guess? Like criticisms of Magento platform, or let's just say the evolution or lack thereof of the platform over the last 5 years?
I think it's super fair, man. Like, I think everything has to stand on its own, right? Just like if somebody was to critique Shopify for being very slanted towards payments and getting their platform fees, right? Meaning like it's all about what you see it or isn't in the eye of the beholder. And so I would say there have been a lot of instances where Magento didn't do right by people over certain periods of time. Like, there were periods of time when, if you know, like the ebb and flow of it, where like in the earliest stages of Magento 2 were very bad for Magento 2, for Magento's reputation, period, right? Like that was kind of a major blow. And so I think it just has never recovered from that. And then what happened with the pandemic and Shopify specifically, and just the ease of the trend, there's the way that all happened, I would say only contributed to it, right? Of where the market shifted. But so I would say a lot of that is like, yes, because you have agency owners talking about, hey, now I don't have to deal with bugs and things not working, or a lot of the extra overhead and challenges that come with Magento, which is a known thing, which is why you see a lot of people trying to focus on optimizing the actual experience of running it or simplifying it. And then two, there's just, I would say, just a lot more upkeep. But other than that, I don't think it's all fair, right? Like, I think a lot of people like treat it as the whipping boy or as a easy target. Like, you see that come and go at different times. There's people with really passionate opinions on the subject one way or the other. And it just, to me, seems like very crass or very easy to do if you're speaking to an echo chamber of people that are already not about that platform.
Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like lowbrow criticism.
Yeah.
So I would say I just don't like when I see that, because it doesn't really speak to the complexities that would make someone choose that platform or do that platform. And again, we have the playing field changing right now with when it comes to code and what is the theme and how do people build their storefront experiences. And so I think that's the landscape is kind of redefining itself again in some ways, where something you couldn't approach before on another platform, now you can, and vice versa. It might be easier to approach something on Magento because you require less access to, you can get the resources slightly more friendly now in terms of development resources. But like overall, I would say it's about those different slices in time and when and where someone's commenting.
Yeah. Yeah, the context.
It's like a very heavy
context of the comment is important.
Yeah, meaning there's a lot, like there was one recently that I didn't expect, where someone who has a pretty outsized impact already is known to be more in the Shopify space, previously did Magento, but then they like made a very like tongue-in-cheek post about it, and I just thought it was like unnecessary. Like, it just, again, when people have nuance, why do they need to take the cheap route?
Yeah. It's also like we don't, like the Magento brand and community doesn't really have the same arsenal of messaging and marketing dollars behind it as some of the other platforms. And I think I don't know if you've experienced this, but this is one of the conversations I've been having with other agency owners, is that while all this is going on in the last 5 years and the COVID bump for Shopify, et cetera, Magento took a hit for sure. But, I think that some of the consensus seems to be around Magento kind of stabilizing its position in the marketplace. And while all the criticism is churning around it, there's actually a lot of really good solutions that have been stabilized that businesses are getting a lot of value out of. And I think that, I don't know if that's your perspective. I'm curious your perspective on, like, now that the dust has settled a little bit from the COVID bump and then the COVID hangover, how do you see Magento kind of coming out of this and maybe, is it?
Well, that's what I mean. I think we're in a new period of uncertainty right now again. And so I don't think it's about coming out of it, because I think Magento was always used by big companies, or it always had its thing. And I'd say, right when that happened is when it was more 2015 to 2018 is when I feel like the problems really happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that was around the time of the sale too. And so it was more, I would say it's never been a better time, right? It's more stable than ever. There's more things. Like, it's just a lot of uncertainty for the future.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's more what's lingering overhead right now. It's just like, where does it all go from here? Or, because the whole notion of commerce is changing too, right? Or some of the mechanisms are evolving. And so I think it's like, again, the reason why someone would pick this tech stack would still happen.
Yeah. I see there's a lot of like nervousness in the industry, technology in general. There's been, news articles about layoffs and devs getting replaced with AI, et cetera. I think a lot of that is sometimes hype. But as an agency owner, I see this as being like, this is a question for you, but like, there's a potential for it puts the agency at risk. There's also a potential for it makes the agency way more relevant. And I was wondering if, like, what are your thoughts on this? Like, as an agency owner trying to get through the next few years?
The landscape shift about AI, you're saying?
AI disruptions, agentic commerce, all this hype that's going around about how the buy process is changing, and
Yeah, no, I don't feel secured to know exactly where it's all going to go. I would say it's very much on the mind. I would say usually it's technologists or people that are involved in technology that move first or hear things. So like, I feel pretty good that we've been at least around a lot of the developments that have been happening the last couple of years, and like are in the, like in the forefront while it's happening. I would just say we live in an age where, like the information people want to be true to suit their purpose is able to be pushed in that way. So meaning like we're all kind of like watching something play out in real time and deciding like, oh, I like that guy, I'm with him, or I like, but like the history hasn't been written yet. And it's like a big battle between very large companies. And then we all are trying to be relevant, right? And use the right ecosystems and be a part of that future. And so I would say it's like, there's a lot of people just, like there's people that get paid to commentate or paid to like always pick whatever's, like pick on what's happening. But then there's also people that, there's a lot of things depending on their company or their staff, their team. So it's a responsibility to evolve. And I would just say that I feel like based on the sheer numbers of things that this is my opinion, that there's going to be a lot of opportunities still yet for more traditional avenues and new avenues. It's just, I think the way the illusion of choice is happening is changing in front of us again. Right? Like if you think about it, you used to be able to turn on a couple sources of news and that would be your source of news. Now everyone's either in their own bubble looking at hundreds of sources. The way people consume information has changed. The way people consume products is going to be limited by economics or freedom or how we live in our existence, right? Because, for example, if oil goes to be really, 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 really expensive, can guarantee you we're going to be reevaluating our purchases, which then impacts the supply chain and impacts whether people are investing in e-commerce platforms. And you couldn't really say that's because of AI, right? Like there's other disrupting factors in society which we saw again during the pandemic. As soon as there was any kind of uncertainty, everyone went snip, 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 snip. I'm scared. We have to cut our budgets, or we have to do this. And then where did that leave their providers or service providers at that moment? It left them in a lot of uncertainty. So I would say we continue to be in that age. And so it's hard, right? Because think about it. You could cry for yourself as a business owner because, hey, I got all these people depending on us. I've sunk my life in this. Woe is me. But then you could also be saying, hey, what about the college students who don't know if the education they're signing up for right now is worth anything? That might be a scary prospect all the same. And they may have less emotional maturity to deal with that, right? Because so it's kind of like, I think it just as a reminder that everything is uncertain right now. And so it's easy when you look at certain charts and you see which fields are being disrupted the most, and ours is one of them, that it forces your hand to have to do something. So I think there's going to be a mix of traditional, but also these new routes are for adaptation. And I think, as always, like, if you think, I use this analogy, like, you know how like there was the person that fixed the VCR or fixed your computer in your house, like what that job is keeps evolving in the modern age. So the people that are able to guide folks on AI are going to be the ones that are relevant in the future, if that's where it all goes, right? If that's the next big technical, if that's the next final technical evolution right now.
Yeah. I also have been thinking a lot about how this, reinvestment, this massive investment in data centers, a lot of people were kind of thinking early on that it's a winner takes all scenario. So, these big companies are going to battle it out. And the end result would be some kind of consolidation. And then there's also the fear of a lot of consolidation around the technology providers, et cetera. There's another path where AI is so disruptive, things start to fragment and you end up with lots of different solutions and not like, these kind of behemoth solutions. But there could be a third path where there's both happening simultaneously. I wonder what your perspective on this is. Do you see this as a force that's going to consolidate, or a force that might fragment things into having, dozens of different solutions out there?
Is there an example of a category or something where you see that happening?
Well, e-commerce solutions, like, platform solution, platform options, and then just AI tools that, is this something that's using a data center and machine learning to build a specific solution for a specific type of company? Or are we all just going to be using these LLMs generically, and that's the future? And so it's a winner takes all scenario.
I would say it's hard for me to think of an all-encompassing answer there, other than that maybe the way that your data follows you and how we maintain our persona, and like you look at the nations with like social credit and things like that. It's like, I don't think that story has been written yet here. So I think intimately identity and who you are is going to be tied to a lot of other elements. And so who controls that, or what are the providers, or what are the standards? And so I think on just a societal level, we're seeing more and more plutocracy, oligarchy, more consolidation in terms of commercial entities, right? Or in terms of the elite members of the society, or like people, just the richest echelons of corporations and society controlling more and more. So I would just say that I think it's going to be either total control achieved and it's going to be harder to be independent, or it could go the opposite and there's some kind of fracturing of a global system, or there's like undercurrents, right? Like meaning we all think each generation is just choosing more technology and convenience, but what if the generations coming now want the opposite? They want more analog, or they know they're being surveilled everywhere they go. So the luxury will be not being surveilled, So I think, I think that story is still to be written. And I think ultimately there's less choice, because choice is good for consumers and they don't want what's good for consumers. So I think less choice, because if you think about it now, do you really have a lot of choice for e-com platform? You have choices, but there's not that many right choices. There's not that many good choices for you. Like, meaning like, depending what, like if you were starting an e-commerce business just to not fulfill it, I would advise you to choose the cheapest platform possible if you're just toying with the idea and never going to get around to it, because Shopify is $40 a month, right? But if you were serious about starting a retail business or serious about starting some kind of like online store with easy access to everything, you might choose a convenient route, but then why would you choose like Ecwid or Wix or Squarespace? Like, to me, there's just certain choices that people make these days that are based on like marketing and advertising, not what's the best commerce platform. Because why would you not choose Shopify if you're starting a e-commerce business tomorrow and just want to get into it and have access to different markets, right? Meaning like every platform integrates with something, but not everyone's building their own. Again, I'm not here to advertise to that. I'm just saying like, that how much choice do you really have? You can make the wrong choice, but I just meant like same thing with cell phones and computers and internet providers. Like you don't have as much choice as you might have had in the past.
Yeah.
Like 4 carriers becomes 3 carriers becomes 2, or, you can't choose your power company, or you can't choose your cable, like you don't have that many choices.
Right.
So I just think the more they can tighten people into systems where no matter what, you're paying the piper, whether that's credit card companies or, the companies that own all the data infrastructure, I think they're not going to care. But it's kind of a cynical worldview, but something tells me less choice.
Yeah. All right. Let me present an alternative view and see if you see anything in this. There's legacy expenses that come with becoming a huge corporation. There's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of bloat. And a lot of this has to be carried with you forward. You have to support something that was built. Maybe that wasn't built in the best, what I would say, current methodologies would, if you had a chance, you would go back and re-engineer it from scratch. So those are risks that I think these big companies might have to,
True.
And then you have Claude Code and people being able to vibe code solutions that might be a replacement for Salesforce at a fraction of the cost. And if you're a big technology provider, that would make me super nervous. And I think that those kinds of like stealthy companies will be rising up and disrupting things. So that might be more of the fragmentation argument. I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah. I would say it all depends what the gas is in the system, right? Just like with like, meaning like if there's a lot of people artificially going to market because of the cost of the tokens or the cost of AI, but then what if they raise the cost? Or, like I would say there's a lot of things that are being built to disrupt right now, but what happens when they decide to tighten those controls, right? Like, are we in that? Like, I always look at it like Uber, like how Uber was heavily subsidized, came in and disrupted everything. Then they got huge control and now they don't have any incentive to keep prices low, right? And, nobody's happy. And so I guess I might need a refresher on this question. Like, I guess the question you're asking is like,
if you were a big technology company,
I would say yes.
Would you be feeling risk right now? Like
sure.
Actually,
it's hard to identify with Salesforce guy, but I would say it's more like, would I be feeling if I was a regular business? Would I be feeling like I had more power? I would say it depends on the people around me. Like, I think you can go and build more bespoke business applications now using AI assisted coding in the right hands than you could before. All roads still lead to the APIs of the end companies you're integrating with, and all roads lead to still, if you're standing up a production system, the costs of that or the maintenance of it. Like, so I think big companies would probably just bet that not everyone is going to have the stomach for what it actually takes to run applications. And so I think I find it interesting, at least that side of it, because you get to a point where you're like, it's so fragile depending on how you're building it.
I'm old enough to go back to the days of like AOL and Yahoo as being the major players in online stuff, and then search, and then this little company called Google came about and kind of blew everything up and disrupted everything and took a lion's share of all of it. I'm wondering if we're not laying the groundwork for something like that to happen again, that maybe one of the biggest companies in America is being developed in a dorm room somewhere right now.
I would hope so. right? I would hope that spirit of entrepreneurship is alive, and that there's obviously a lot of new fortunes being created right now. A lot of people leveraging the tools that are available to do things that were never possible. So I would say that's a fact.
Yeah.
There probably is something happening because of that, or some good.
So let's bring this back to the community, because one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on the podcast is that you've made a lot of good contributions to the community and said a lot of good things about the community. So looking forward, with the Magento Association and the community, or we can just talk about community in general, like the idea of community.
Way.
Yeah. So what are what have you gotten out of being part of a community? What do you think? What do you think is there a future for, the importance of community around running an agency, software development, et cetera?
Yeah, I would say community is everything, because community is what helps you stay grounded, or helps you see what's going on out there, or connect around mutual problems. And so I would say the community, there's different rings to it, right? There's people with similar businesses, there's people with different businesses, but we're all part of one community of people using this software. And so I think that is inherently friendly, right? Like, because again, it's not unique to Magento, right? Like, look at Adobe software. Oh, Magento is an Adobe product, but like, look at Adobe software historically, right? Like, anyone ever used Photoshop or Illustrator, there were people that either made plugins for it, right? As a commercial business, there were businesses around that, or there were power users or people writing books, and back when you couldn't get knowledge so freely, right? Knowing someone. So I would say there's always been a benefit to being in a community, because it gets you access to information and access to insights. And so I would say that has been instrumental for me in reflecting, right? Like, you could say that it goes both ways. Sometimes you get ideas, there's, dissemination of ideas that maybe you wish you didn't know, right? Ignorance is bliss sometimes. But like, at the end of the day, I would say that's what it's meant to me. And it's also made a lot of friends, or, affinity around the world. Like, it's a very global community. So I think it's cool that in Magento, you have those bridges being built among people in different countries, different walks of life. I think it's cool, because it's not always like that in communities, right? They're not as, I don't know what the word is. It's like, there's a lot of disparate type of people. And so, like, for me, what supporting that means is just so that more people get to experience that, right? Like, somebody did it first. And so it's all about paying it forward, or keeping traditions going, or inventing new traditions. And so I think that's what community means to me, is just being a part of that.
Yeah. I mean, I found the Magento community to be very, giving and open to sharing. And I think there's a lot of people that are actually in competition with each other, but they're more than willing to help each other out. I think that generosity has been really nice to see. I don't know if that's been your experience.
No, totally. That's what I mean. Like, it's like a people with a shared set of challenges. It's not like, yes, there's people that do things that are cutthroat, like it's business, but it's not only that, right? It's not only, it's much more like the spirit of helping everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that'll continue. I'm a bit of an optimist. That's kind of my default mode. I hope for the best. We don't always see it, but I think that a lot of hard work is being done by good intentioned people that hopefully will move things forward.
Yeah. And I think whenever you have something like an association or some kind of thing around it, it creates expectations, but then there's also conditions of which it operates in.
Yeah.
So historically, because there's a Magento Association, the purpose of that association has meant different things to different people. Or like Shopware United in the shopware world is a similar type of a organization. So I would just say, when you don't have a central personality, it's a problem. Meaning, like, Magento used to have Ben Marks as a mascot, right? He was the Magento mascot, traveling from place to place, the face of Magento, PHP and Magento. Shopify has two mascots, right? Toby and Harley. Magento has no one, right? Like, there's no unifying person that people look to. Like, I looked to Matthias at the Magento Association. I think he's great. I love working with him. Hope that happens for much time to come. I think he's been a great figure because that's at least been a person who's been doing that, but then there's still some muddling. And so I would just say like my feeling is that like there's always going to be something that no one expected. And so I just think the more we can create open spaces and less gatekeeping and more ability to be more in your face about it, I think we could have a more united community. Because why are there LinkedIn communities with tens of thousands of people, or there's people like there's like a lot of affinity user groups out there. So how do you turn those affinity users into something more focalized on something? And I think that means there needs to be like a central authority or something a little more fervent, meaning like, how like Shopify has their editions a few times a year that then creates this frenzy. Plus they have their annual con and they have that figured out. And so in Magento, it's just more fragmented, right? You have each nation or each country doing different Meet Magento activities sponsored by different people. And so there's no central like point of excitement other than, hey, yesterday was patch day. How bad are the vulnerabilities this time? Or when there's a global catastrophe of that nature, everyone kind of rallies around it. Like Sansak, he's a mythical figure in the like Willem de Groot. He's like a mythical figure in the Magento in the like, right. He's someone that if you know about it, right? Like that's an example of someone that everyone looks to as a North Star in this community for a specific subsegment who holds an inordinate amount of power. So I would say the more you can find things like that, the more you might get excitement. But Magento might be inherently the other kind of community, like a more natural community where it's like follows those natural order of systems, or the macro level scientific nature of large groups and with all these other factors. Like it might be something really cool in that social experiment kind of way.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. The future is going to be interesting, as it always is. I think there's going to be a lot of changes coming, forward. Yeah. I'm curious to see what happens. So to kind of wrap this up, I guess, why don't you give me your perspective on where you're hopeful, where you kind of hope to see the community, and then tie it back into your own personal experience and your agency, and we'll let you kind of wrap that up. Say whatever you want as the final word.
I hope it goes to a place where if in talking about Magento, that that just more information, like true information, comes to light, and that there's more of a realization or an awakening that people have more power than they think, and that if more companies started contributing, it would create some kind of a ripple effect. And I've heard people say, "Why should I contribute?" And that's what I don't get. Right? Because why should you pick up a piece of trash you walk by on the street? Because it's the right thing to do. Like, so I think there's a lot of this nasty, capitalistic, not altruistic side of people. And that is what needs to go, because I'll just go back to my example. I've done a lot of things that are not necessarily good for my economics, but just because it's the right thing to do, or because I have some kind of idealism about it. And so I would say, that's what I want to see more of, is that, because what you see right now is you see a lot of people just doing their own thing. Like, okay, I'm going to make this, or support me in this, support me in this. And there's a lot of those different wings. So again, I think if there was some central overarching thing or some way to bring everyone in, and like, again, like, why do anything that's good for society? Because it's good for society. So I think there needs to stop. This is where I have vehement disagreements with whoever's in charge of the Magento Association right now. There needs to stop being this playing nice with everybody and being all cool about it and not asking for money. Like, if money is what fuels the future of the ecosystem, there should be more of that, right? Like I'm on the verge of getting involved in some more membership activities, but I just think there has to be more of this like broad-based appeal to a humanities side of it. And that could be, hey, increase transparency. That could be, hey, show people where it goes, or create some effect. So, because it's hard to get everyone to agree. And so I would just want to see more of that, like more people doing things just because it's the right thing to do, or supporting each other, and more of that awareness. Because I think that awareness is why certain other communities succeed more, or have a little bit more togetherness or momentum. And I think that I would love to see the merchants in Magento realizing that they have all the power and contributing as well and giving a little more back in that sense, because again, by being good stewards, you're ensuring your own future with that platform. And so it only makes sense to invest in professional development for your team, invest in professional opportunities for your team, invest in whatever visibility you want, because you could be a maker of something using the software, but that could still be used to get you prestige in your industry, right? Like standing out among, how like a lot of industries or verticals have their own trade associations.
Mm-hmm.
So like best ecom implementation could be a way for a manufacturer to stand out in their industry, which might help them with something. Like there's a lot of, circuitous routes to success here, but I would say I would like to see that if I was being hopeful. And then just to tie it back to what I'm doing in my efforts is that, I just want to have more opportunities to engage with people, to understand what they want or how people are evolving or how to find the common challenges amongst like why businesses are succeeding and failing right now. So I would think that is something that just, that I'm passionate about. I'm a lot as passionate about the whole like rough and tumble selling aspect of business, which I would like to be more passionate about. And I know you can relate on those subjects, but like there's a lot of that element to it. So just want to see people do well. And then, I was wondering if we could tie in, what we're doing on the heart disease front, and just to talk about that for 1 second, just to
Absolutely.
wrap it up.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So something I wanted to share with everybody is about genetic heart disease. There's a disease called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. I'm an ambassador for the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association. I also have this disease. 1 in every 250 people have it. It is a thickening of the heart, and it changes the mechanic and like the way that the heart muscles expand and contract, like the actual muscle fibers. And it's like a leading cause of like sudden cardiac arrest in young athletes and young people. And when you hear about people like suddenly passing away in their sleep, and so it's screenable, it's treatable. And so just the more people are aware that this exists, and the more that they have, if they can relate their family's heart health history to their own history, like, oh, I had an uncle, a cousin, a brother, a family member pass away, that means something. So connecting those dots and then getting screened. And then separately in the e-commerce world, we're raising awareness through an initiative called Hearts of Commerce, which is meant to do exactly this. Again, e-commerce companies have an inordinate amount of power in this world. There's a lot of money flowing around. So if we can get more focus on employee health and heart health in the workplace and raising awareness about these diseases, it creates a better overall outcome for everyone. So just wanted to shout that out. Thanks for the time again. Thanks for having me on. And I like what you're doing.
Thanks, Maier. I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate you coming on. So for the folks listening, how do they find you? What your agency online, et cetera? So if they want to reach out, they can reach out.
Sure, yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Maier Bianchi on LinkedIn, Bemeir.com, Bemeir.com. That's our website. And heartsofcommerce.org is the e-commerce heart disease initiative, and 4hcm.org is the actual nonprofit. But yeah, excited to chat, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, we're wrapping that up. Thank you, Maier, for joining us. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Magento Association Podcast. We will catch you next time.